you have any views on drug policy? Do you think we're doing things correctly now? I think that's perhaps where my interest in this sort of thing came from about maybe 6 or 7 years ago. For my journalism degree, we were tasked with making a short documentary, and I did mine on drug policy. Went to a drug charity and filmed there, and then ended up volunteering for that drug charity. I was just very interested in how harmful these drugs can be, and also how beneficial some drugs can be, but ultimately how harmful the drug policies that we have in place now can be. And I think that's maybe sparked interest in free will, because if we don't have any free will, then people who become addicted to drugs didn't make their choices. And that's quite a backwards way we as a society view people who are addicted to drugs, is they made their own choices. Well, maybe they didn't. Do you think we should be changing our drug policies? Is decriminalization an option, do you think?
Yeah, well, first I just want to echo something you said, which is I very much agree that, every mental illness is as a result of the stress vulnerability diathesis. So people come with different degrees of vulnerability, and then it's the environment that determines whether or not they're going to get that mental illness. People who are very vulnerable to that mental illness don't need a very, addictogenic environment, and they will get addicted. They'll find something. But with our work ecosystem today, with so many addictive substances and behaviors, even those of us who previously would have been immune to this problem are now vulnerable to the problem of addiction. So I agree with you in the sense that that the environment is a huge player in terms of how many people will get addicted and what they'll get addicted to, and that it's not just about a person's let's say brain chemistry, because we all have that same wiring that has us approach pleasure and avoid pain. And that's essentially what addiction hijacks, is that motivational circuit. In terms of the criminal justice system and our drug policies, clearly we haven't figured it out yet. As you well know, in the US, we've had this war on drugs since the 80s, where we arrested people for even possession of small amounts of cannabis, put them in jail, and that as soon as they got out, they continued using. So it didn't decrease the problems of addiction or related harms or criminal activity. And because of structural racism in this country, it led to the vast majority of people who were incarcerated for minor drug possessions being people of color. So clearly that's not the answer. However, I do not believe that going to the other extreme and making addictive substances legal and widely available is the answer either, because it's very clear that one of the biggest risk factors for addiction is simple access to that drug. If people have more access through whatever means, they're more likely to get addicted. So I think we need to figure out what that middle road is. I do think that the criminal justice system has a role to play. Why is that? Because one of the common symptoms of severe addiction is that people will engage in illegal activity in order to get their drug of choice. So people with addiction will interface with criminal activity. I conceptualize that as a symptom of their addiction. But it does mean, because they are engaging in unlawful and potentially harmful acts, we do need to hold them accountable. So it's holding them responsible for those actions while also trying to get them treatment for their addiction, which they only have a certain degree of responsibility over. So I guess that's where I come in. I think we have to, and this is happening, in myriad different ways. The criminal justice system partnering with the healthcare system to use things like contingency management or rewards and punishments to funnel people who break the law as a result of their addiction into treatment rather than into pure, incarceration or other legal sanctions.